Hi, I'm Jeff Bond, and welcome to the Steward Chair, our show about how great leaders build enduring companies that leave a lasting legacy. We believe that leadership isn't about ownership, it's about stewardship. So whether you started your own company or have been entrusted to lead it, we want to help you be a better steward of the people, the mission, and the future that you create through this show. And so the only favor we'll ever ask of you is that you follow this podcast wherever you listen. Thank you. Can a popsicle company become a movement for joy, sustainability, and shared leadership? In today's episode, Steve Carse, co-founder and CEO of King of Pops, shares how a layoff in 2009 sparked a business idea that's grown into an iconic Atlanta brand and cultural staple. With carts now slinging palettas across the South and a growing network of franchisees, Steve opens up about what it means to lead with empathy, evolve your values throughout parenthood, and steward a business with purpose over hype. If you've ever wondered how to build a company rooted in community, creativity, and joy, this conversation is for you. So let's jump in. Steve, welcome to the Steward Chair. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Excited to be here.
I've really been looking forward to this. I really want to start by helping our listeners understand a little bit about how you started King of Pops, which has become an iconic Atlanta brand. In fact, you're sitting, for those that aren't seeing right now, under the iconic rainbow by one of the carts. And I tell my family all the time, I cannot see one of those carts without getting a popsicle. And fortunately, I've gotten to know you as a leader, and I think it's a wonderful leadership story. So I want to start with just you sharing a little bit with them about this accidental entrepreneur background.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had like my little eBay businesses growing up and stuff, but I at one point decided I needed to quote unquote grow up and kind of get a regular job. And that job was in the insurance industry just before the Great Recession. And so that sure thing quickly became a not sure thing. I got laid off in 2009. I was one of the less expensive people in the building. So I made it a little bit longer than some folks. Saw 3 layoffs. I was in the 4th. It kind of imprinted on me that there are no sure things. And it prompted me, I was 25 at the time, to start this business that obviously I'm super grateful to be a part of 15 years later, but probably wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had that not so gentle nudge from the economy.
I love that, the not so gentle nudge. And we'll get into the evolution of the business because you've been through a lot. I mean, that was born out of a time of economic uncertainty in the downturn of 2009. And, you've seen COVID and so many other things happen. So we'll get there when we get there. But I always like to start by saying that, we view stewardship as a long-term responsibility of a leader to care for what's been entrusted to them, whether that's people or a mission or a company or community or all the above, right? We want to look at leadership through the lens of stewardship. And that really comes with a cost to it at times, maybe that we don't realize when we first get into something that we're passionate about. So I want to ask, when did you first realize the cost that comes with leadership and the responsibility?
I think I was anxious about it from day one. Our very first 2 hires were basically, the cliche contract on a napkin. I said, we'll pay you $1,000 a month for as long as we can, but winter is coming, as they say, and popsicles will not be sold at a pace that can support that. So it was a pretty generous salary for what we knew. That second year we hired the first people. But from that very first day, it felt like a big responsibility for us to be super transparent. I think that's been our big thing, is like, this is the situation we're in. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're also going to be honest when we are doing great. And we hope that we can sign you up for that. I think that's helped people understand and learn about business, which has prompted many of them to go on and like do their own entrepreneurial things. Or when they kind of move on to a larger opportunity, they have that context that is, I think, helpful really in any work you might do. Early on, I certainly thought like, all of the things were just going to, be answered by someone else. But it kind of became clear as we got into it that we had to figure all this stuff out together. And yeah.
Love that. And you kind of brought your brother into this business too, right?
Yeah, so Nick joined. I was on his. I got laid off. I had actually purchased a condo with my sure thing salary, and when I got laid off, I rented it out within like a month. Moved onto his couch. We started working on pops, and he was in the business really from day minus 30 or whatever, minus 90, I guess, from first we opened, and then a month or two in, he was a lawyer at the time, so he was a prosecutor in Gwinnett County, which is a suburb of Atlanta, and I he knew I wanted him to come do it, but it got to a certain point where I was going to have to hire somebody full time. I told him, look, we can do this thing 50-50. I don't know if it's a wise financial decision for you to do since you're making a great salary right now. It's a pretty easy decision for me when I was making $0. Um, I said, if you want to do it, let's jump in, let's do it. And that was probably May. So he had been helping me nights and weekends since we started in April. End of May, he was on board full time. So pretty grateful for that. And it's been fun for sure.
And what did the family think about him leaving his cushy legal job?
I think they were not super enthused about it. My dad wrote my brother Nick a letter urging him not to do it, and you can still have his story and still be working with him, but might as well keep your job that's paying you a good salary while you can. And Nick had already put in his 2 weeks by the time he received that letter, so
Yeah.
kind of fell on deaf ears. But yeah, they weren't super excited, but that changed. I think within a couple of years, kind of my dad came out of semi-retirement and was our first delivery guy, so he was working our wholesale accounts. That was pretty fun. And then my mom was doing collections and like bookkeeping stuff for us fairly early on too. So it
Wow.
became a family affair. I've got another brother, an oldest brother, who's an anthropologist who, when he was doing his field work in Latin America, is kind of where we got inspired to do the paleta to begin with. But we would go to family outings and four of the five of us would be talking about strategy or whatever. And he'd be like, well, I just had a grandkid. Aren't we going to talk about this 2-year-old is doing this new cool thing or whatever? We're like, oh yeah. Sorry. Let's focus on family for a minute.
Love
But
it.
it's fun. It was really enjoyable and still is, to be honest. They're really proud and obviously super glad that Nick's on the 50% train with me. So we're the non-advisable 50-50 partner.
Yeah, nobody tells you to do that,
Yes.
but when you have that trust built,
Yeah.
it
Worked
goes a
out
long
for us.
way.
Yeah.
You mentioned paleta in Latin America. Just give context to those who aren't familiar with that.
Yeah. So the paleta is basically the Latin American version of the popsicle. Instead of refined sugars and artificial food colorings, it has fresh fruit and natural sweeteners. It's got a great story where you all know fruit, it gets really ripe, you end up throwing it away. That's how living things work. But what's amazing is at the peak of ripeness, when it's gonna got maybe a day left until it's gonna be garbage, is when it's the most sweet, when it has the strongest flavors, and it is then transformed into a popsicle, which obviously extends the shelf life for weeks or months, to get that product and not waste it. So that's just a cool story, I think, in general about environmental sustainability. And then in addition to that, the product is fun and has a huge variety. It's beautiful. It's like a palette of endless options. Anything can make a good popsicle. So it's been that was our inspiration to get the whole thing started. And these carts are obviously, if you've if you've traveled or if you've been in the Latin American community, you've probably seen them getting wheeled around, and we're proudly using them as well. They say if it is not broke, don't fix it.
That's right. Like I said, I cannot see one of those carts in the iconic rainbow umbrella and not walk over and get a popsicle for whoever I'm
Appreciate
with.
that very much. Yeah.
Yeah, you bet. I appreciate you. Well, so you kind of had this idea. You found it in Latin America. It was born out of necessity that you had to figure out how to make money and start your own thing. And so you started this business, brought the family in against maybe the family's desires at the time. But of course, as you're doing this, your values are being shaped, I'm sure. And particularly as you're hiring people, you mentioned a little bit about the challenge of COVID and all of that. But what have been some of the pivotal decisions or challenges in your business that have really tested the values and how they have evolved over that time?
Yeah, it has really evolved. Certainly the first few years were just really hustle, grind, get sweaty is one of our core values, which, if you're selling popsicles outside, it's going to happen whether you like it or not. But it goes further than that. And we really valued pushing yourselves and really putting in the effort and appreciating a hard day's work. And I would say, like, if I was to force rank the core values or something, certainly the first 5 years, that was far and away at the top. Push through, make it happen.
Yeah.
And then
It's a
as
common
we got,
business narrative, right? You hear that all the time, right? Blood,
yeah,
sweat, and tears and
exactly.
never quit.
And I wonder, looking back, like, we don't have any financing. So I wonder if it could have happened any other way. I don't actually know. We didn't have a super, succinct business plan. We were kind of going by feel a lot. But as we've gotten into the business, I think we've realized how much some of the softer things matter. I know, like, as a 25-year-old, I at that point didn't have kids. I didn't really understand a lot of the things that were commitments beyond kind of, having a good time and then doing work. And as I've grown older, that has become a part of my life. And I've realized that was like a missing piece of me being a leader. I don't think I, to all the people that worked for me in those first 5 years, I had kids. I'm sorry about that. And I think I'm now kind of understanding, like, yeah, it isn't just like caring and the amount of hours you put in are not always directly correlated. So you can care a whole heck of a lot, be a great employee, but also have to, yeah, I've got to turn off at 5 because I've got soccer practice to go to, XYZ. Or if the kid's sick, I mean, I now have a 1 and 3 year old, and when my kids get sick, I feel like, woe is me, the world is tumbling. And I could remember feeling back in the day like, is that really a thing? Which it very, very, very much is, as parents know. And I think, beyond just directly parenting, which a lot of folks are doing, there's also just all the other walk-in shoes. Like, you might be taking care of your grandma, or you might be having some type of health issue. And I think that's been a big learning for me, and certainly like the theme of this podcast of being a steward and really being an empathetic leader. I think being honest about that and asking questions and caring is, it's not hard in a one-off case. It's not hard to go ask someone how they're doing and care. It is really actually quite challenging to have a team of even 5 or 50 people, certainly hundreds of people, where you're able to have the energy to genuinely ask and care. It's easy to just get caught up in accountabilities and what do we have to do to move this forward. And it's made all the difference when we have done that well. And I think we've been at the, when we have been at the other side of it, I think upon hindsight, we've noticed it. So it's a super important, but very, very, very hard thing to do.
Well, I appreciate you going there. I appreciate you talking about the evolution of your values, because I think in life, the 30s is just kind of like a whirlwind, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're having babies, you're maturing, you're realizing that you're not cool anymore, like, things just change quite a bit. And if you're starting a business, and so many more young folks today are starting businesses in their 20s, which I think is awesome and incredibly inspiring to see all the entrepreneurs coming out in the world. Uh, the values do evolve, and you start hiring people, you face business challenges and short-term pressures of business performance.
Yeah.
It's hard to see the long view. And so if you were to look back and maybe talk to like 25-year-old Steve today and talk about a longer term vision, what kind of conversation would that be?
I think I still struggle with this in a meeting, but I'm just kind of wired pretty tight. And like, my 3-year-old daughter is in a preschool where they do a lot of different breathing exercises. They make them fun, like star breath and roller coaster breath. And I think I would just need to take some more deep breaths, because I was wound up so often as things were going wrong, or going right. Like, something's going right, you still want to serve the customer and nail it. If I could, and I don't know that I could because I still struggle with it, I tell myself, take a deep breath, just kind of you being anxious and overly excited about this is not going to help the outcome. Certainly, it might hurt it. And just take a deep breath. That would be my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, yeah. I love that, and I don't wanna go off on a tangent, but one of my favorite podcasts is Diary of a CEO. They just had a scientist on there that talked about nitric oxide and how depleted that is in our bodies, and a lot of that comes from lack of, nose, breathing,
Really?
and so I typically would breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth. That's kind of what you're taught, right? But
Yeah.
he says you really need to do in through the nose, out through the nose, and do slow breaths through that,
Huh.
and that helps replenish nitric oxide, which helps improve circulation and attacks diseases and so many other
There we
things in your
go.
body. So there you go. I've been doing a lot of that myself these days as an entrepreneur. Is a lot of nose breathing.
Yeah. Good. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I didn't know that. I know that, you can feel the difference, like, in your heartbeat if you
Hmm.
focus on it enough. I didn't know that one. So that's cool to
Yeah,
hear.
yeah. I think more and more leaders just, I mean, that's a simple thing you can do, particularly if you're speaking a lot, you're out there influencing like you are,
Yeah.
writing books and out there just trying to change the world and bring happiness to the world, these unexpected moments of happiness, which is your mission, right? And how did you come
Right.
to that phrase and what has that meant to you?
Yeah. Early on, I think as someone that starts a business, you're looking for this purpose. And I think you sometimes hold yourself to a very, very high standard, as in it has to be so unique and so inspiring and so XYZ. And I was definitely in that spot. And so it kind of happened to us in a very authentic way. We were a small business, so we didn't have a whole lot of benefits. So I was searching for cheap ways to kind of take care of the crew. And we were maybe 20 employees, five full time, 15 that were kind of slingers at this point in time. And we had one of our slingers was a great yoga teacher. Her name was Charlie. I asked if she would, for like, her regular fee, host a class. And we invited the team out to it. Said, this will be good for you. Do some yoga. We don't have any health benefits, but here's something. And we all went to this event and it was great. And it was next to, at that time, a dirt path that turned into the belt line. We knew it was going to be the belt line, but it was none of it was completed yet on the East Side Trail, which is one of the busiest parts. And so our class was there, and people were starting to walk by and ask if they could join, and we'd say, "Yeah, sure, why not?" Got up to maybe 30 or 40 people, which was pretty cool. And then winter came, and we stopped doing it. So we'll start this back in the spring. And when we started it back in the spring, we had a marketing director, and finally somebody to kind of focus on the marketing side. She said, "You guys are sitting on like something pretty cool. We should be sharing this. If people that don't even know about it are wanting to do it, imagine if people did know about it." So she started sharing and promoting the event. Quickly got to 3, 4, 500 people. And then we wanted to do a big one. So we said, "Hey, we're giving out pops. This is a really special event that we feel is kind of making a difference in the community." And what certainly was not just yogis. It would be people in jeans, people bringing their kids, people bringing their dogs, a mishmash of people that knew what downward dog is and some that had no idea. And so we got to the end of this big culminating class. It was probably 800 or 900 people. We wanted to fill this entire field. It was probably a 2 acre field. So we have like the drone picture of that day, which we're really proud of. But during Shavasana, which is the pose that most classes in, it's kind of the nice part. You're tired, you get to close your eyes, and just like we were already talking about breathing. So probably some of that science of taking some deep breaths was at play there. But I was overwhelmed with a feeling of this was so much more important than anything else we were doing. I mean, it felt, this sounds dramatic, but it felt like a little bit out of body. And I could just feel that like this mattered to people around us. And so we had, you know, been sold 50, $60,000 worth of popsicles at Music Midtown. We had gotten into Whole Foods. We had all these business accolades that were pretty cool. But this, by a long shot, just felt way more valuable and way more important. And it kind of struck me just laying there with my eyes closed, like this is what our business is all about. I didn't immediately have the words around it, but it was, creating community or creating happiness. So that's where it came from. We eventually, a group of us got together and came up with like unexpected moments of happiness, which I think captures a lot of where we can kind of differentiate as a brand and add like the most value. So our whole thing is we think we can add the most benefit to the world, happiness, however you want to measure that, through UMOs. We call them UMOs. And a lot of them are not related to anything. It's events like that, or it could be complimenting somebody or offering to take a picture when we're at the cart,
Hmm.
those simple things. But in order to kind of measure it, because they say what gets measured gets matters or improves or all of the above, we decided we wanted to give away 1 million pops. So it's been a commitment for
Hmm.
us over a 10-year journey. We're 2 years in. And if you go to our website, you'll see in the top left our little up to the day
Ticker.
counter of how many we've
Yeah,
done. And
that's
we're in the
cool.
mid 50s now. So we've got, thereabouts 950,000 more to go. But we're planning on growth, and we're planning on figuring out more ways to do this. And what I feel is the unintended consequence of the way we've set this up is that our purpose is obviously good for the end user, which is the person to receive the Umo or the popsicle or the high five or whatever it might be. But it is, I would say, equally, if not more valuable to the person that is creating it. So that feeling that I had
Yes.
of being a small part of creating that yoga event was probably at the end of the day more meaningful to me than anyone else that was there. Similarly, like it could be anything, whether it's the Humane Society or an elementary school that is doesn't have as much funding as another one, or a baseball team that you want to just give some kudos to. Like if you're able to be the force that creates that kind of moment of happiness, that is really valuable too. So it's been a fun process, and we're just getting started.
I think you touch on so many phenomenal points there, but the thing I really want to hone in on is just the importance of stakeholder orientation in your business and relationships. You have the customer, you have the UMO recipient, you have the pop recipient, you have the cartpreneur or the people who are giving out the pops or slinging pops, as you talk about it, which I love.
Yeah,
You have the community around you. Just you talked about like kind of the sustainability things that you do with fruit, and so you're thinking about all these different stakeholders in your business and how you're finding win-win-win opportunities that are good for business, and you and I have had this great opportunity to meet through conscious capitalism, which is very much a pro business, pro capitalism movement, a for
yeah,
profit movement. And we believe in driving profits for business, but going beyond that profit to find ways to really intersect with all of those stakeholders that you have. And so I think you also touched on the point of you don't have to have everything figured out from the very beginning of your business. You don't need to have a clearly laid out business plan against traditional business school knowledge. You don't have to have your values completely crystallized or a purpose. So many people talk about this, and I think it's getting in the way of a lot of entrepreneurs starting things, and just trusting their gut, going out there and doing something
yeah,
that they're passionate about. So you talked a little bit about some people that have maybe left your organization that have done great things and become entrepreneurs. What kind of advice do you give leaders today who are considering these kind of entrepreneurial ideas and dreaming a little bit? What do you say to them?
gosh, it's a great question. And I feel like my answer changes year to year. And where I'm at right now is really checking in with folks. It's kind of almost sounds like a downer, but I don't mean it to be. Are you, what are you searching for? Because I very much believe that entrepreneurship is a good career path for a lot of people. But I do think it's ultimately a different job with a different compensation structure. And it is
You
not,
did say you didn't make any money in the early days,
yeah.
right?
Yes, I think if you really kind of have done that work where you've looked yourself in the mirror and said like, am I trying to work less? Because you can probably work less working for somebody else. Am I trying to make more money? You can probably make more money working for somebody else. If you really want to be the person that has that weight, which is a weight that allows for a lot of, I think, pride, but also a lot of pain and sleepless nights. Like if you're wanting that, like this is a good path, and I would recommend it to anyone who can like honestly say that. But I feel like a lot of times there's the goal of figuring out a way to optimize enough where I'm not involved in the thing and it runs itself and I'm still getting a paycheck and I can do blank. And I think that is pretty unlikely in general. Like if you're just to be playing the odds game. And then in addition to that, ask yourself why. And if you could be enjoying what you're doing, which I think is the better question, whether it's entrepreneurship or you're working for somebody else, or I mean, somehow not working if you're able to do the fire movement or something like that. I think that's the conversation I would want to have. I'm not sure it's exactly a question, but I could probably try to frame it as one if we worked on it a little bit.
Yeah, what are you searching for? I love
Yeah.
that. I've also heard other people say, "What breaks your heart?"
Yeah.
Sometimes have people have that heartbreak moment where they really want to solve a social issue or
Yeah.
something. There's lots of ways you can start a business, both for and nonprofit, that can allow you to go out
Yeah.
there and feel fulfilled.
Yep.
Uh, but you realize that there's a cost to it. And you kind of talked a little bit about this. You touched on the role of humility in your leadership journey. So, have you ever had to kind of let go of anything along the way just to grow and to kind of put other people first or allow them to thrive in your business?
Yeah, I think not enough. I mean, to be honest, I think there's a lot of times where myself and I mean, it's one of the benefits of having like a brother in the business because you can look at them and you know them really well outside of just the work hours where it is sometimes easier to see that when you're looking at somebody else. So we're able to tell each other that a little bit. And I know I've been the bottleneck holding our organization back on a lot of fronts. That's just a truth. Some of the things that I think I've gotten a little bit better at letting go of that have been valuable. I mean, this is in the weeds, but is really just kind of some of the operational nuance. It's really hard as a leader to see an issue like a customer service type issue. You kind of know the answer that is going to be given, and you're in front of your computer. So you feel like you should just hit send, like that's the right thing to do. But it creates kind of, it undercuts kind of the person that is accountable for answering that. And it also kind of sets an unrealistic expectation with the customers. That's a maybe I'm a little bit recency bias. Just came in with a meeting where they were giving me the feedback that I kind of was doing that, but I'm consciously trying not to do that. Um, that's one that comes to mind, but it's a
Yeah.
long list to be honest with you.
It is a long list, and I know what you mean. It's as when you start by yourself and you have all the autonomy and the control, and the decisions can be yours, and all of a sudden you have other people who are responsible for leading and making decisions, stepping over them and coming in
That's
to
really
rescue
demoralizing.
something is undermining, really. And they don't you don't look at it that way, but
Yeah,
that can happen. And then those unresolved tensions can be disruptive to your
yeah,
culture, right? And so one of my favorite books is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And the baseline of that is always trust, right? And if
yeah,
trust is undermined and it's broken, then you can't have accountability. You can't have attentiveness to results. You can't have healthy conflict. But what I love about your story is that people gave you that feedback. And not every, leader, co-founder, CEO, president has an environment where it's safe to tell them that and to say, that really didn't work for me.
yeah,
And so affirming to you, kudos to you for allowing for that feedback to resonate and for you to consider it.
yeah. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Uh, you wrote a book
Yeah.
recently. I want to talk about that. Work is fun. Why did you decide to write the book?
I decided to write the book. First, I'm a writer. I was a journalism major at UGA. So
Go dogs.
go dogs. It was in my still in me. It's still in me somewhere, and I think I kind of had suppressed it with just like writing long LinkedIn posts or whatever for a few years. But so that was part of it. I think maybe more importantly is as we get into the beyond adolescence, middle aged business, we're 15 years in.
You're a
There's
teenager.
just a lot of stuff that needs to get captured, um, so we don't lose sight of it. I think we'll still evolve. I think our culture will still evolve, but almost a handbook for our team and now our franchisees. So during COVID, part of our pivot was to start allowing others to take these carts out in their neighborhoods, which we'd always done all of that ourselves, and then times were tough, and they were also tough for some of the folks that were our first franchisees. And so we wanted to give them that opportunity. We needed that opportunity, and that has really taken off. But the further away that gets, the less of a relationship they've got with myself or with Nick or with the team here or with our history. So it's a place for people that it connects with to hopefully find out more about our organization. And then the people that are in it, as they grow their teams and as they grow their businesses, they can kind of see what has worked for us and hopefully apply that to their business, because it's so cool to get to sell those. Because if you're starting it in Houston or Denver or Miami or DC or any of these places, it is the same business that Nick and I started. And there's probably a little bit more figured out, but there's a lot. There's still the awareness problem. There's still great customer service. They're still getting things from X, Y to Z, getting to the locations. So I think it's that. I think it's this longish document where we can both talk about stories, so you can take those stories with you, talk about what's important and kind of keeps us engaged in this 15 years. I think probably one of the most rare things I think about our business that we don't say as often as we should is Nick and I are in this business. We don't have any funding, and we're planning on just being in this business. And there's a few folks that are in that bucket that we really look up to, but more often than not, the goal is grow it, sell it, or grow it so you can not be involved. We're just growing it in a healthy way because we like doing it. And one day we'll be too old to push the cart, but we have quite a few years left before that.
Yeah. Well, I know it's going to resonate with a lot of people. You built such an iconic brand, and I know your authenticity and everything that you've learned over those 15 years is going to be packaged into that book. And I know it's going to serve your franchisees and so many other business leaders well. So we'll include a link to Work is Fun in the show notes. I know we're coming up on time. So is there just one question that if I were an audience member sitting here right now that I didn't ask, that you're like, ask this question? What do you hope for people to take away from this conversation?
Oh gosh, I think we've touched on a pretty wide variety of stuff. I think the one that is top of mind for me, because I'm in book promotion mode, is just this idea that if you're in a workspace where you're really dreading it and Mondays are terrible and you can't wait for 5 o'clock and you're looking at the time, I think I've been there. I think most people have been there, to be honest. But it does not have to be that way. And I don't even think it has to be where you need to leave. I think there's just some mindset tricks. Tricks is the wrong word, but ideas that you can implement into your personal growth that will make that more enjoyable. And when work's more enjoyable, that's great. And I think that's, we're all kind of selfish beings. So selfishly, it's good, but it also helps you show up for your family more. It helps you be healthier. So I don't think it's as simple as just like, here's this other facet. They're all very intertwined. And so I don't know what the question would be, but if they said, why should I make work be fun? I'd say that.
Couldn't agree more, Steve. Thank you for coming on the Steward Chair. This has been great.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for listening to the Steward Chair. If today's conversation inspired you, we'd be grateful if you'd follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. This show is brought to you by Chat with Leaders Media and End of the Line Productions, a collaboration committed to helping leaders steward their influence with purpose and impact. Our production team is Quentin Thomas, executive producer, Thomas Mastrototoro, associate producer, Daniel Mastrototoro, managing editor, and me, Jeff Bond, your creative director, host, and research lead. Until next time, go be a leader worth following.